My name is David Keith, and I live in Deerfield, Mass. There are sort of several communities of Deerfield, and I'm in Old Deerfield as opposed to South Deerfield and West Deerfield. Um, I first heard about the pipeline because I go to a family-run orchard called Clarkdale that we don't really mind keeping secret because they have the best peaches in the world. And I discovered that Kinder Morgan Incorporated wants to run a pipeline right through that orchard. They have since seen the error of their ways and decided to adjust their route so that it's not right through that orchard, but it's still going through Old Deerfield. There was also going to be a compressor station at one point, and it appears that temporarily at least they've decided to move that to another town, which doesn't do the other town any good either. I've worked on some projects involving the oil industry and written 2 books, After the Gold Rush and The Hidden Cost of Oil, which I wrote with another person who had worked in the oil industry. And I just wanted to check the numbers on what this projected pipeline is about. It is extra concerning that the natural gas that will be in it is from the fracked shales of New York and the Marcellus Shale. Fracking has, as most of you know, a lot of downsides to it. One of them is that to do the fracking, to fracture the shale, they pump a lot of toxic chemicals into the ground that help facilitate separating the gas from the shale, cracking it, and keeping the shale from closing in and preventing it from venting out. And those toxins come up with the gas. So the gas is not just methane, it's natural gas with the fracking contaminants in it. And Kinder Morgan has refused steadfastly to say that they even know what's in the gas they'll be putting through this pipeline. In fact, they don't even guarantee that it would stay just as a natural gas pipeline. They can put anything through it. So as I began digging, I began to doubt my numbers because the pipeline has been described by Kinder Morgan as being 36 to 42 inches under high pressure. That's 1,400 psi, pounds per square inch. That's what the compressor stations do. And that much gas is a colossal amount of energy. So I began looking at how much gas New England might need, and it doesn't compute. It clearly doesn't compute. There are studies that have been done for ISO New England that state an anticipated growth in demand of 1.4% per year in gas demand for peak days. And that means that the available capacity on a peak day has to be growing by 1.4%. The inflow to Massachusetts that the Energy Information Administration says is what comes into Massachusetts, minus what we put out of Massachusetts. So the net inflow to Massachusetts that we have lived on for, well, since 1999, it's grown twice for 4.4% each time, something like that. We have lived on that quite well, is that net inflow is 2.1 billion cubic feet per day, total to the state. This one pipeline will bring in 2.2 billion cubic feet per day to Massachusetts. So my question was, can that possibly be used? And the answer looks like no. When you point to the record of what Massachusetts has used and projected growth rates, the answer that comes back over and over again is, well, that's if you want to keep the dirty coal plants going, or keep using petroleum, or even nuclear. But if we repower plants, as has been happening, then you see where the gas is going to go. It'll go to electric generation, which is not part of the historic record. So I looked at the numbers for how much power this could produce versus what plants might be subject to repowering, which means it did not include what's already generated in New England by gas, because many of the plants have already converted. And it did not include things like hydropower, biomass, or solar, electric, and wind. But if you just look at the total power generated by coal, by petroleum derivatives, oil or gas, gasoline, and nuclear included, this is still far more power than all of that. So it's more than twice that generating capacity. So then you have to ask, well, who is going to use this much power? And the answer looks like it looks like it has been tipped by an application by the Maritimes and Northeast Pipeline Company to reverse the flow of their pipe that was built to bring gas from Canada to the Boston area. Actually, it started in Maine and came through slowly, but got to Drake it. And by reversing that flow, they would be diminishing the amount coming into New England. The recorded level that was anticipated before, that's by 800 million cubic feet. But they tend to expand that and have it flow north to St. John, Brunswick, Canada, and to a liquefying plant. This may sound conspiratorial, but the Environmental Information Agency makes no, administration doesn't make any secret of it, that they anticipate, there's an article you can look up that says the anticipated surplus is going to go to export. So that's all makes economic sense for Kinder Morgan to be able to get gas to a market like Europe, where the price of gas is far higher than it is in Massachusetts. And, I suppose I shouldn't begrudge a business their plan, but the big hitch for me, and the part that does make me angry, is that it's being misrepresented, that this gas is intended for the Northeast. It's called the Northeast Direct Pipeline Expansion Pipeline. And it isn't headed for the Northeast of New England or of the US. It's headed for Europe. And the difference matters. It matters a lot, because we in New England are being forced to pay for this pipeline. on the grounds that it's for the greater good of the community, that eminent domain takings of the land that it's going to go through is legitimate because New England supposedly needs this gas. But if it's just going somewhere else, that's about private gain. That is private profit for Kinder Morgan and the companies that the pipeline's serving. So eminent domain should not apply. And I think that they should pay royalties to, as is the common practice in Canada. When land is taken for a pipeline, the landowner gets royalties on what goes through that pipeline. And that's totally called for here because Massachusetts conceivably could use the 0.2 billion cubic feet per day, but the other 2 billion cubic feet per day are not coming here. And I think there's probably an argument to be made that the alleged shortfalls of New England are being manufactured. A Wall Street investment firm bought the Brayton Point power station, and within 5 weeks of the purchase announced that it would be closing that coal station, which was the largest non-nuclear power plant in New England. There are 2 advantages to that for them. I happen to notice that the assumed efficiency of larger power plants, of them converting to gas, means that, on paper anyway, they get credited with a lower heat rate, which is a way of comparing the amount of energy in gas to what electricity can be produced from it. So if you take the largest coal plant and do not convert it to gas, but instead simply close it, you're taking away the more efficient use of gas to repower that plant. And you're beginning to make it look like New England isn't going to have enough power. I can only surmise, I don't have any proof, but it's suggestible that the closing of this plant might benefit an investment company that wanted to invest, that might have investments in the potential rises in fuel costs that occur when a shortage is approached, compared to the loss they will take on closing the plant. Other than that, Kinder Morgan has not been very upright. They have several times shown deceptive practices. For instance, giving presentations about the compressor stations that showed pictures of a 2,000 horsepower compressor station when the one they're talking about building is 120,000 horsepower. That's a different thing, and they didn't say so. And the very name Northeast Direct, as I've already said, is misleading. It's going to the Northeast, but to Europe, not New England. So that's basically what I've been trying to piece together, and we've shared that with towns, and I am helping try to encourage towns to use their Board of Health powers to say no, that if we are going to hold corporations as people in some instances, they deserve to be held responsible as people in others. And in this case, Kinder Morgan is a felon. Their record includes injuries and deaths of people that were their fault or faults of their subsidiaries. And why should a town do business with a felonious enterprise? So,
Can you talk a little more about what Deerfield's doing with the Board of Health?
I actually noticed, having been on Sunderland's Board of Health, that Deerfield has an odd arrangement where the select board is the Board of Health. And I had always questioned that because the Board of Health is actually representing state laws, and the select board is only representing town laws, town bylaws. Boards of health, much to most people's surprise, actually wield more power than a select board. In this case, they were the same, but at a meeting at which the select board was asked by a large contingent of their citizens to oppose the pipeline, I stood up and said, there may be another way to do this, which is to have the Board of Health say no. And there's a real question of whether there is authority to say so. Because in other instances, the preemption clauses of federal versus non-federal preemptibility of who gets to have the power has sided with local boards of health. There was a case of Cambridge, Mass. Opposing anthrax research at Harvard or MIT, I'm not sure which, where they actually did shut it down. And it was promoted as a national defense need. So there was a question of preemption by the federal government, and the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Board of Health, saying, yeah, you can do that. So I'm hoping that will work here, and we have a wonderful attorney who has significant experience with oil companies and their tactics. And he offered his services pro bono to have the Board of Health try this, and hopes now to also have them and especially the select board ask state representatives to pass legislation to mandate royalties. So I think there's a pretty good chance that Kinder Morgan is going to regret at least trying to be deceptive about this. If nothing else, maybe we can make them tell the truth about what's in the pipe, how much is going elsewhere, and who's paying for it.
I read in the paper that part of this lawsuit was based on the fact that there had been an explosion, I believe, in California, where 8 people died from a pipeline explosion, and that was the Kinder Morgan pipeline.
It was a subsidiary. They try to claim it wasn't them, but that's what they always do. There's always another name that they put on the company, and it's who profits from it that matters, and they profited, and it was deemed criminal negligence, and that's the felony, and that's why they're a felon. So.
And that the coming through this area, through the state anywhere, would be a hazard to anybody's potential hazard to health.
You know, it's basically like laying an Atlas rocket under your yard. This is 1,400 pounds of miles of gas backed up. If there's a rupture, it's going to come out, it's going to blow. Another issue that I want to look at more closely is that I've seen elsewhere that gas from Marcellus Shale is called wet gas, which means that it has mostly methane, but there's a high component of liquid, ethanes and other liquids. And in a rupture, those other liquid, dirtier components tend to stay at ground level, where methane goes up and the flames go up, there's the potential for a rupture of the more liquid parts to form a cloud that's basically a floating bomb at ground level. And that's certainly considerably more dangerous, not to mention just the seepage of chemicals that could come from ruptures. One of the things that got a lot of people upset in this area is that by picking a rural route, they were able to use, because rightly, on more populated areas, the standards are high, but they're able to use in a rural route a skinnier thickness of pipe so that it's more susceptible to rupture. And obviously the thinking is despicable. It's that if we only kill a few people, we can use skinnier pipe because the cost-benefit analysis says it's okay to kill those people compared to, how much it would cost not to kill them. And that's just not acceptable. That's possibly a bureaucratic way to look at it, but that's precisely what boards of health are there to do, is to say, no, it is not okay to say that saving this one person costs too much. And that's their job, is to say, we look out for the safety of each person. And it's not about numbers, well, $100,000 extra is going to maybe, might save 10 people, but, so.
And has Kinder Morgan replied at all to the legal issues that are being raised here?
I believe they have. I think they're trying to say, forget about it, it's FERC's job, you have no control, and go away. Give it up. It's a nullity, I think was the word they used. And we disagree. So we'll see them in court, I guess.
And so Deerfield will be entering papers into the legal systems shortly, or?
Well, I believe it's up to Kinder Morgan to sue the town, because the town has made itself clear. It has said, you can't come here.
I see.
And if they want to come here, they're going to have to say so. And they probably, we're certainly wondering if their reluctance will be in part because, I should say not their reluctance, court proceedings will mean that there can be discovery, which would be a chance for the town to find out what's going through this pipeline and to make Kinder Morgan say what's going through the pipeline, and they may not want to do that.